That's a level of patience, number one. And number two, when the action happens, there's not going to be any action replay. You've got to be willing to have prepared yourself, to have done field craft dedicatedly. Imagine you're waiting for 15 days and you've not got a single tiger shot, and the tiger comes out for 20 seconds and just passes by.
So Sumesh, today, there are a lot of opportunities for children, and a lot of people I meet, they ये इच्छा जाहिर करते हैं कि वाइल्ड लाइफ फिल्म मेकर बनना है, वाइल्ड लाइफ फोटोग्राफर बनना है.
Right.
उनके लिए अगर आप 5 चीज quick 5 points, if you tell them, so they're watching, and what is it that they should look forward to? बताइए.
So there are actually, let's put it in 2 ways. So A is that they like wildlife. That's an opportunity for them to spend time in the jungle, right? That's one thing. B is they like cinematography. So I would like to say at the outset that wildlife cinematography or being a wildlife filmmaker is a very, very difficult and a tough profession. So the first start has to be that you like wildlife, or you enjoy being in forests in solitude for many, many hours, sometimes many, many days, even months. So if that's the start you want to do, and understand that it is not going to be a paying profession, or it's not going to be the glamour which you generally see on social media. It's not going to be all that. If it is what cinematography you want to do, then definitely, and there are other options. Bollywood is there, television is there, OTT platforms have come up. So that's my first suggestion to anybody who wants to be a wildlife filmmaker. First, really understand whether it is that is what you're passionate about. Filmmaking across the board is a very intense profession to get into, in terms of the hours you're putting in, the conditions in which you're filming. Even if you're working on, let's say, an ad, on commercial projects, you're working on mainstream cinemas, it is a very long and intense process. You're dealing with lightings, you're talking about equipment, you're talking about getting every aspect of the frame right. But wildlife filmmaking has its own set of extremes which one needs to know or get used to over a period of time if they want to get into wildlife filmmaking, into cinematography. For example, when you're shooting wildlife, at times you have to shoot in temperatures in summer which can go anywhere between 47 degrees and even touching 50 degrees centigrade. And we are talking about the temperature. And very often you're shooting in open areas, you're shooting in open jeeps which are moving at a particular speed. So at that time you also have to take into account the wind heat factor. How you got a wind chill factor, is a wind heat factor, whether it can be really, in a project. I remember we were just, I think the whole crew were about 6 of us, and in a day you could go through almost maybe 60 bottles of water. I mean, even the food sometimes doesn't stay long enough because of the heat. If you're going into remote locations, you're carrying food with you. That is a different kind of a challenge. Then very often, especially in countries like India, you're shooting in the monsoons, in dense forests, in vegetation, so that itself has its own challenges. You're constantly making sure that your gear doesn't get wet and your shots are perfect, your lenses are clean. So that itself has its own challenges. Then you have, even in this kind of a situation, you have a lot of parasites and insects you have to deal with. There are leeches when you're shooting, so you have to just get used to the fact that when you come out of a shoot, you'll probably have a few leeches clinging onto you here and there. So that's one aspect. So sometimes you're shooting insects, or we're shooting insect babies. That time you want the natural behavior. So the last thing, at least I don't tend to apply any insect repellent, because somehow I feel, it should not affect the natural behavior of the subject which we are shooting. I mean, they're all macro, they're very tiny. So at that time we don't even apply any mosquito repellents. And I can't say it's funny, but there are times when your forearms are almost cloaked with mosquitoes sitting there, having a field day while you're filming. That's another aspect of it. Then there is aerial cinematography. So when we get aerial cinematography shots, if we're taking shots of hilly areas or mountainous areas, then we try our best to get the best perspective possible. Undoubtedly, the drone goes high up and takes the shots for you. Very often you need to trek and go to a particular point from where you can get a vantage view of the kind of shots you want to take. You have to go at a particular time, let's say at sunset, sunrise. So you're trekking all the way up. So there is X amount of even physical stamina required. You're carrying equipment. Your tripods are even up to 20 kilos sometimes. Your camera, your gears are very heavy. You're carrying it in the jeep, getting off the jeep. Sometimes you're going by foot. You're carrying jibs. For example, we've also used custom-made jibs in our films. So you're carrying the jibs all over the place, taking it off the jeep, taking it to location, carrying it to location. So it has its own set of challenges. And at the same time, you have to be in one with the camera. As I mentioned earlier, the camera has to be an extension of you, where after all this effort and all the conditions you are in, especially weather conditions, you have to get the right shot. I also remember in a couple of our schedules, it was so hot, the temperature, that okay, we were dealing with, but the cameras at some point could not deal with it. We had, rubber peeling off, we had the memory card slots getting stuck. So all these are different challenges. So you have to be prepared. I mean, it's amazingly exciting. If you are passionate about it, it's amazingly exciting. But this is an aspect you have to definitely look into if you want to get into natural history filmmaking. And one more aspect of natural history filmmaking is that you have one shot at it in most circumstances. There is no retake. If you're shooting a tiger action is that one shot. A cub hugging his mother is that one shot. A tiger doing any other unique behavior, it's one shot. A bird, a bear, whichever subject you're shooting, there's no retakes involved over there. You really have to work on your field craft and your ability to think and work with your equipment on the ground. It will be many years of learning the field craft. I mean, wildlife filmmaking starts with learning field craft first, about how to come into the jungle, learning from a mentor probably, what kind of species to cover and what habitat the species lives in, what kind of camera setup is required to cover that kind of species, what kind of lighting, because this is all natural lighting. There is no, a lot of cinematographers I come across have learnt to work around artificial lighting. This is natural lighting. For example, when I film completely on manual exposure. So every aspect of the exposure is adjusted, including ISO on location. So if a tiger, let's say a tiger is moving, it goes from a shaded area to a brighter area and back to a shaded area. It's all manually exposed. We do that because we don't want the hunt or the jump in the exposure. So you have to understand it's a very trying field. So I spoke about exposure over there. Secondly, coming to manual focusing. So in wildlife filmmaking, at least when I am making wildlife films, I am constantly manually focusing. So if a tiger is say coming from the front walking towards you, you are at the same time focusing and you're zooming in and zooming out in case you have a telephoto lens. If you have fixed lens, then that doesn't come in the picture, but you're manually focusing. So you got to almost tie up your right hand literally and learn to work with your left hand. You're in a situation, imagine you're waiting for 15 days and you've not got a single tiger shot. And the tiger comes out for 20 seconds and just passes by. Now that's the shot you're waiting for. Or let's say you're shooting and there's a gorge and the tiger comes out. Now that is the level of expertise you need. That's the level of patience, number one. And number two, when the action happens, there's not going to be any action replay. You got to be willing to have prepared yourself, to have done field craft dedicatedly, whether you're doing it in your cities where you're from or towns or villages. But when you come to the jungle, so why I'm giving this backdrop? Once you're willing to do all these things, actually be in a rigorous situation where you're getting up at 4 in the morning, you're handling equipment, you've done data transfer the previous evening, you've charged probably 8-10 batteries of your cameras, memory cards have been emptied into your hard disk, various copies have been made, you've checked your hard disk, so those copies have gone into all the mirrored and all your hard disks. So this is the whole wildlife filming process to a great extent. If you're willing to do all these things, that's the first step you take towards wildlife filmmaking. So a great way of starting is photography itself. Camera, your mobile camera. I mean, start with your mobile camera. Start with basic equipment. Take a DSLR. Nowadays, you get much lighter mirrorless options. Also, start photography. Start working with cameras but I suggest that try to learn more of manual work, manual exposure, manual focus. Start composing shots. Then gradually go into videography. See, the videography, the challenge is as the animal moves, the lighting condition changes, the focus changes. That's so important that you need
to learn everything. You need the camera to be, or your mobile phone to be, an extension of your own self. What do you think should translate into your camera? So that's a great way of starting. Now coming back to the commercial aspect, so there are a lot of commercial options today. You can tie up with so many of the channels. You can, first of all, start, I think it's very important to learn under a mentor, see who they are working under, who they are tying up with. Very often or not, through the mentor itself, you can do much more work, because a lot of the mentors today are production houses. So they need cinematographers, they need editors. In India, I see today that maybe there are budding editors, but there's a great space in post-production also. There's short division, editing, color grading, DI. There's a huge opportunity there also. So there I feel that gap can be definitely filled. And so when you work with a mentor, when you work with a production company, that's what you can begin doing. You can look at the aspect which you enjoy the most. Maybe you just want to write script. Maybe you write very well, and you realize, I would like to be part of the script writing process. You go to the jungle along with the team, and you start writing the script there, and then you start framing the broad structure of how you want the script to be. So there are many aspects of filmmaking one can decide, and wildlife, especially in the Indian context, is a very well loved and well watched kind of genre. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but it's very important to start with the mentor and go with the flow. Go with the flow of the mentor, and it's a very small niche, wildlife. It's not like Bollywood or television where you have maybe 50 production houses. So wildlife is a small niche. You need to learn to be patient. You need to learn to be willing to learn. That's the biggest thing. Learn to be willing to learn. Keep your mind open, because a lot of the mentors out there have spent maybe 20 years, 25 years in the field filming. They know exactly, all the rigors. So you may need to get up at 4 in the morning. You may need to go without your your morning cup of tea. You never know, no, what the rigors are on the field. You may be having breakfast and suddenly you get you come to know there's an alarm call. You got to get ready with the equipment. So traditional filmmaking life is different, and wildlife filmmaking is different. So you need to get used to the rigors of it.
That's really interesting and very insightful. I'm sure the budding wildlife enthusiasts and whoever's interested would really be interested in the whole journey, and hope we see a lot more movies coming up there.
Yeah, look forward.